Declan Canna.
Is for the have pilings and have the floor above the level that this water is going to come.
And one of the byproducts often of hurricanes are tornadoes. A tornado watch often goes up once it gets near the coast. We have that tornado watch we just showed you for the eastern areas of North Carolina and northeastern South Carolina. That watch up until later on. Fortunately, tornadoes associated with hurricanes tend to be F0 and F1.
Right, and we also should point out that they don't normally take place near the eye wall. They're more apt to be in the outer rain bands.
So places like Raleigh, Durham, Fayetteville, possibly, and even
hopefully there won't be any. You know.
And let's show them the Doppler radar estimate of rainfall so far. This is very impressive. You can see how the Doppler radar out of the coastal area is adding up the rain as it goes. And see those brighter colors, those kind of pinks off the coast, right in here. Well, you can't read the scale over here, but right now, those areas off the coast have picked up 13.6 inches of rain based on Doppler estimates, and already around the Brunswick County area, right along the beaches here, we're looking at totals of 8 to 10 inches of rainfall. And that is, again, going to be the other story once Fran makes landfall and moves inland.
And once it winds down, it will wind down and weaken as all hurricanes do, but not the rainfall. The rainfall will still be heavy, and we're very concerned about what might happen when it gets up over the higher terrain.
Through the Appalachians.
Right.
Okay, John Hope, thanks for the update there. We will have continuing coverage on Hurricane Fran here at the Weather Channel. We will be hopefully going back to our live coverage on the beaches, weather depending. Now, though, with the rest of the forecast, including your weekend, and more details on that heavy rain event in the northeast and mid-Atlantic, here's Sharon Resultan.
Comprehensive coverage of Hurricane Fran from the Weather Channel.
Hurricane Fran set to make landfall across the beaches of North Carolina in just a few hours. And thanks for watching the Weather Channel. I'm Mike Seidel here in the Forecast Center, along with senior forecaster Stu Ostro. We've got the latest on Fran, which was being compared to Hurricane Hugo, but fortunately not quite the storm Hugo was.
That's right, Mike. Hugo was a Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and Fran fortunately has maintained its Category 3 status. It bottomed out last evening as far as the pressure goes, and then came up a little. Unfortunately, no further intensification has occurred.
There was concern when it crossed the waters of the Gulf Stream that it would maybe pick up a few miles per hour, but it didn't happen. Here's the latest now from the Hurricane Center, 7 p.m. Eastern. 60 miles now south of Wilmington, North Carolina. Sustained winds of 115 miles an hour, so it is a Cat 3, as Stu mentioned, on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It's moving north-northwest at 16, so if you do the mathematics, 16 into 60, we're getting about 4 hours. We're talking about 11 o'clock tonight, coming in right around, oh gosh, Carolina Beach, Curry Beach, those areas are going to be really hit hard.
Right, Mike. Although one thing we have to point out is that even though it will take a while from this point for the center of the eye to cross the coast, the hurricane force winds extend out some distance, and the worst of the hurricane is really already coming on shore, not only in the places you mentioned, but right down around Cape Fear, Bald Head Island in there.
And we've already had a report of a wind gust at Southport, which is in southern Brunswick County, of 120 miles an hour, and the amateur radio operator had a sustained wind of 105 miles an hour. Here's our broad shot of Hurricane Fran. You can see the expanse and the geography it's taking over about 3 or 4 states. And the other story, once it makes landfall, we'll get to a little bit later on, will be the tremendous amount of rainfall.
That's right, and as long as we're on the subject of Category 3, Category 4, I think we do need to point out that even though it's not a Category 4 or a Category 5 hurricane, in other words, it may not be causing extreme or catastrophic damage, a Category 3 hurricane is still a major hurricane capable of extensive damage.
And we're still talking about a storm surge of up to 12 to 16 feet.
That's right, particularly in those beaches just north of where the eye is now. We can illustrate right in here where the coast is shaped like this, and all the winds will be coming in generally out of an easterly direction, piling the water up. Fortunately, the high tide has already occurred several hours ago. We're heading toward low tide, but I think as we'll hear from Jim Cantori, if we're able to hook up with him in a moment, the water is surging forward, and the wind is pushing it even though we're heading toward low tide.
And speaking of Jim Cantori, let's go live to him right now. He's in Wrightsville Beach. He's not on the barrier island. We moved him over to the mainland on the intercoastal, so he's out of the direct path, out of harm's way there. Jim, what is the latest from where you're sitting right now?
Well, Mike, we're definitely feeling the brunt of Hurricane Fran, or at least the start of it, if you will. Winds are easily at Hurricane force. To give you an idea what this feels like, the rain coming down horizontally, and it is coming down very heavy. It's like I'm getting pelted with these little small stones in my face. Just before we came to the broadcast, there was a large snap to my left. Now, I'm on a balcony in the second tell. And there is a large tree off to the left. I would imagine that is one of the limbs. There have been several limbs broken already on some of the trees around here. And there's a lot of debris, a lot of shingles all over the place. And I heard you and Stu talking about the tides. And I'll tell you one thing, even though we're past high tide and we're going to probably see this thing at low tide, I don't ever think the water went back out. I mean, there's a overwater.
Okay, let's come on back out. We're obviously having problems talking to Jim Cantori there in Wrightsville Beach. And obviously the weather is, you can see Jim kind of trying to grapple with those hurricane-force wind gusts at Wrightsville. He's, again, not on the beach. We moved him back towards the mainland, but he's on the intercoastal, and that's only a few miles difference.
Right. I think it's important to point out here that Jim is not on the barrier island. He's not right along the immediate beach. We did move him onto the mainland, and what he was seeing was a rise in the intercoastal waterway, which is the little strip of water between the barrier island and the mainland.
Let's give the viewers at home and those of you watching, certainly from the Carolinas, an idea of where our live crews are. Let's go to the radar because we can really get a sense of the eye wall, and Stu can kind of show us and give us some weather expertise here on maybe kind of a double eye wall and those rain bands now on shore.
Okay, first thing we ought to do probably is outline the coast a little better so we can see it. This is the South Carolina-North Carolina border. Here is South Carolina, here in North Carolina. Myrtle Beach, the Grand Strand, is over in this stretch here. This is Cape Fear, right about here, Bald Head Island. And Jim and the crew are just inland, maybe a little bit up the coast. Wilmington a little bit inland from there. And then we have Carolina Beach, Curie Beach in here, and Topsail Beach a little bit farther up. If we look at the structure of the hurricane, we can see that there's a massive area of rain that has already come on shore, heavy rain, and that will be an increasing story as we go through the next couple of days and the hurricane moves northward. However, right along the coast, these initial bands came in earlier. Now we're getting some tremendous squalls coming in right along the corner of the coast around Cape Fear, the worst part of the hurricane right along the outer edge of the eye. So again, even though the center of the eye is still offshore, very heavy weather coming in right now.
And already in Brunswick County, reports of 5 to 6 inches of rain. A little bit later on, we'll show you the Doppler radar estimate as far as what we think will happen. We're looking at 10 inches or more, and these areas have been hit by rains in the recent weeks, especially back through the southern and central Appalachians. So that's going to be the other story going into the weekend, the remnants of Fran and all the rainfall. Hurricane warnings continue right now all the way from Eddystone north to the North Carolina-Virginia border. North of there, a hurricane watch for the Tidewater area. That's those of you watching in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and the Hampton Roads area up towards Northampton and Accomack counties of the eastern shore of Virginia. And we continue those tropical storm warnings north of there and also south of Eddystone Beach. But the worst weather, as we've seen with Jim Cantori live there at Wrightsville Beach, is in southeastern North Carolina. And as we saw on the video there, the live shot, they are getting hurricane-force winds. Southport, I mentioned 120-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Frying Pan Shoals, Stu, which is a buoy about 50 miles offshore from Wilmington, has had a wind gust to 124 miles an hour.
That's right, and even though that anemometer is a bit above the water and it's way out there in an exposed area, the wind gusts won't be all that much lower right along the immediate coast on the beaches and in the exposed areas of southeast North Carolina. These are very powerful winds that we're talking about.
And we have the official wind gust right now from the Weather Service reporting stations. We can show you those. The highest officially is 74 at Wilmington, but even up towards the Sounds, the Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds, we're getting wind gusts up in excess of 40 miles an hour, which is a tropical storm force wind gust. Back in the interior now, winds around Raleigh-Durham gusting over 30 miles an hour. And another problem in the interior besides the rainfall will be the risk of some severe weather. Storm surge, we kind of touched base on that, but along and to the right of the center is the worst place.
That's right. Around any low pressure system in the northern hemisphere, and that includes hurricanes, the winds blow counterclockwise. So if you picture the hurricane moving forward, it's on the right side of the center of the storm that the winds are pushing the water on shore. Now, for example, when you get a hurricane skimming along the Outer Banks, it actually is the reverse. It's at least as far as one type of coastal flooding, that is with, for example, Pamlico Sound sloshing back from the west. But the situation that we have immediately in the next couple of hours south of there is the water being pushed in from the east.
And a cubic yard of water weighs 1,700 pounds, almost a ton. So if you can imagine a 15-foot wall of water, and on top of that, add on the waves, the crashing waves, 15 to 20 feet. We're talking about an incredible force, and that's why often it's not the wind but it's the storm surge which does the most damage in most hurricanes.
Right. We'll have to wait till the daylight hours tomorrow to start getting a better idea of what sort of storm surge damage might be going on along the coast right now. We hope that the fact that it is a Category 3 hurricane, not a Category 4, the fact that it is heading toward low tide, at least in some of these areas, will minimize the damage to a point, but we would expect there to be some problems, no doubt about that.
And the other problem, too, every time a hurricane moves on shore, we always get a tornado watch, or just about every time. It's almost a given. And there is a tornado watch out now till midnight for a good deal of eastern North Carolina, including the Raleigh-Durham area and back towards the Myrtle Beach area. And it is the northeast quadrant. Tell us more about why the northeast quadrant is more suspect for tornadoes with landfalling hurricanes.
Maybe due to a couple of reasons. One, some frictional effects as the hurricane comes on shore, and also the wind direction coming in out of the northeast, while aloft it's coming from a different direction, helps spin them up. I think this raises an important point for folks that are inland and don't have to worry about any storm surge. For one thing, the winds will be very strong from the hurricane at least some distance inland, and also the threat of tornadoes, which can spin up very quickly, and it is after dark, even though there may not be too many of them. It's going to be a stormy night out there in eastern North Carolina. People need to be careful.
And real quickly, let's show that Doppler radar just to give you a quick idea of how much rain has fallen. Now, this is an estimate, but already, Stu, we're seeing some of those kind of rosy and pink colors in the southern part of the state in Brunswick County. That indicates over 10 inches of rain has fallen. You combine a wet ground with those high winds, and that increases the risk of trees getting uprooted and power going out.
Right. The radar that we're looking at right now is actually showing rainfall totals and accumulation of rainfall over time. And even though it is an estimate, excuse me, it is an estimate, we're not sure the exact totals. Certainly those totals are very high, and as this heavy rain and tropical moisture move north and northwest up into areas farther north, Virginia, Pennsylvania eventually, and there may be some additional lifting, what we call orographic lifting up the mountains, additional moisture squeezed out on top of saturated soil. Those folks need to realize that they have a potentially significant weather situation headed their way as well.
Okay, recapping, Hurricane Fran, a Category 3, expected to make landfall in about 3 hours. We'll have continuing live coverage from the beaches and here from the Weather Channel. Now with an update on your weekend weather and the prognosis for all that heavy rain in the northeast and